Hey everyone, John Heath here again for MiltonRose Learning with another Let's Learn video on Frankenstein context. So this one is all about when science and nature collide. So we're going to be looking at some of the key contextual factors like we normally do. Then we'll look at how those factors kind of bleed into the narrative and kind of drive it forward. And then we'll round off with three of the best kind of contextual quotes which will help you get the high marks in your essays and the exam. So first off then, let's have a little look at the key contextual factors. So firstly then, I think the big one, as it kind of shows there in the image, is science versus nature. So this was set during the rise of scientific discovery, and the novel explores fears of actually playing God, kind of creating new life, which people were quite worried about in this period, and the dangers of pushing science too far. So there was kind of deep-seated social anxieties about uncontrolled progress if science was allowed to just kind of run wild and do what it wants. And that's obviously seen through Dr. Frankenstein's weird and wonderful experiments. Also, there was what we would call an Enlightenment conflict. So Victor Frankenstein, represents the Enlightenment ideals of reason and logic and scientific discovery. But the novel ultimately critiques those values, warning of emotional detachment and moral failure. So the Enlightenment, as we know, was a big philosophical movement around about this time, and it was preaching that the human mind and logic and rationality would basically solve all of our problems. And it obviously isn't true necessarily. So Mary Shelley wanted to kind of critique the Enlightenment ideals and actually show that rationality doesn't always lead to a better world in some ways. Okay, then we have the changes in Western society, and we can see Frankenstein there looking very sad for himself. Now, society in the West was changing very much in this period, so let's kind of pick apart a couple of the key threads there. So first off, isolation and alienation were kind of creeping into Western society as we started to urbanize and as we started to kind of industrialize as well. And kind of it was leaving a lot of people alienated and isolated. So Victor and his creature both suffer deep loneliness, which shows the emotional cost of rejection and unchecked ambition, but also cast a kind of glance on this changing Western society as people uprooted their lives and then moved into the cities and moved into the factories and things like this. So it's almost a comment on the changing Western society there. Also, the Gothic tradition. So Frankenstein uses dark settings and horror to explore fear, guilt and the unknown, which were extremely Gothic themes. And it'd be very good for you to research the Gothic conventions in more detail, because your teacher would definitely be looking for those in your essays. Okay, then we have, how does that feed in then to Shelley herself and her kind of views on all of this, because it's very important to get after the writer's views in your essays if you want the high marks. So first off then, I would say she's critiquing the danger of unchecked ambition. If we just follow the Enlightenment blindly and just follow science blindly, it's only going to lead to problems. I think that's her key takeaway from this book. So Shelley warns against the blind pursuit of knowledge and power, and Victor Frankenstein's obsession leads only to destruction. It doesn't lead to scientific or empirical progress, it just leads to tragedy and chaos. So I think that's her first kind of authorial intention, if I call it that, to kind of to show us the danger of this unchecked scientific ambition. The second one as well, I think she's critiquing society's judgment at this time. So Shelley highlights how prejudice and rejection, which is obviously what happens with the monster, can turn the innocent into the monstrous. So society's cruelty ultimately shapes the creature's fate and ultimately turns the creature into a kind of homicidal, kind of raging monster. And I think that's what she's there to critique. She's kind of saying that society is too harsh towards the outsider and we need to be more accepting of people different from us. And I think that's a very profound lesson for us all, actually. Now, how does that context play out in the actual text itself? Well, first off then, as we can see, just a nice image there of the monster. As we can see here, we have scientific ambition and the Enlightenment. So let's have a look at that first. So Victor's obsession with creating life reflects the Enlightenment ideals of reason and progress, as we've kind of learnt. If we apply our minds and the scientific method, then anything is possible. That's what the Enlightenment was teaching us. But Shelley is, as we know, critiquing the blind ambition by showing the emotional and the moral costs. Scientific ambition is all well and good, but it can lead us into some very, very problematic areas morally and ethically, and we need to watch what we're doing. Scientific progress is fine, but it needs to be tempered and controlled. I think that's really, really important in this novel. Then we have romanticism and the power of nature. Let's have a nice look at an image there. Lovely image of the sublime in the romantic image of nature there. So how does that play out then? So the novel contrasts cold scientific logic, i.e. the Enlightenment thinking, with the beauty and healing force of nature, which was to do with another philosophical tradition of romanticism. They love nature instead of science. So that echoes romantic beliefs that nature offers spiritual truth and emotional refuge. Basically, it ain't all about the Enlightenment. Romanticism offers almost another way of looking at the world, maybe a better way of looking at the world. So it would be very interesting for you to research Romanticism and how they saw the world, especially their views on nature, because that's definitely explored in the novel. Then we have isolation and society's rejection. So the creature's suffering reflects societal fears of the outsider, people who are different from mainstream society, and his descent into violence is driven not by evil, but by loneliness and constant rejection. The monster is not the monster or the creature is not totally evil at all. The creature is born without morality. They don't know social norms. They don't know what good or evil actually means. But they are turned evil by society's kind of very callous treatment of them, and then they're rejected, and it turns them, it makes them kind of into this kind of horrible figure who goes on a homicidal kind of rampage almost. So let's round off by looking at some really interesting quotes to help you out with your essays. So first off then, there we go, is a great quote from Victor Frankenstein. So this one shows the dangers of ambition and knowledge. Learn from me how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge. Oof, okay, very, very dramatic quote there, hence the image. So Victor there is warning Walton about the risks of unchecked ambition. So Shelley uses that quote to critique the Enlightenment faith in progress without moral responsibility. Scientific progress is nothing if we don't keep strong guardrails there in terms of our morals to make sure that it doesn't go out of control. Okay, and I think that quote's very, very important, almost like Frankenstein or Victor Frankenstein has realised now that moral truth. Okay, then we have the creature himself. So the impact of rejection and prejudice in society. So the creature says, I am malicious because I am miserable. Okay, and society has made them miserable. So the creature explains that his cruelty comes from rejection and loneliness. He wasn't born evil. I think that's a much too simplistic interpretation. The creature is made kind of malicious. So Shelley there is highlighting how society's prejudice can shape our identities and turn innocence into vengeance. Okay, the creature was born innocent without any concepts of good or evil or violence or anything, but then they rapidly acquired those kind of norms as society kind of twisted their mind in some ways. Okay. And back to Dr. Frankenstein or Victor Frankenstein. We have the obsession with purpose and progress, very similar to the Enlightenment again. So nothing contributes so much to tranquilise the mind as a steady purpose. So let's unpack what that quote means. So Victor's early obsession with scientific progress, just like the Enlightenment, shows his initial belief in reason and ambition, but it foreshadows the tragic consequences of single-minded pursuit of knowledge. So because he was kind of rapidly after progress, it tranquilized his mind. It kind of numbed him to the need for ethics and morality, and ultimately, as we know, that only led to tragic consequences. So really key didactic message at the core of the narrative there. Okay then, so let's just have a little kind of little overview just before the end. So we've unpicked some of the key contextual factors, especially the conflict between Romanticism and the Enlightenment, and the dangers of scientific progress as like if we don't control it. We've looked at how that context then bled into some of the narrative, most definitely, in terms of isolation and society's rejection of the outsider, such as the creature. And then we've rounded off by looking at three of the, in my opinion, three of the most interesting contextual quotes that would definitely be good. I'll be looking for them to be cropping up in my students' essays. So it'd be really good for you to kind of stand back and analyse those and just think about those in greater depth. And it just remains to say, really, if you found this lesson useful to you, please do hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon. It's always really appreciated by us. And keep watching the channel because we'll be releasing new videos every week. And it just remains to say after that then, thanks for listening and take care.